Good evening. Hope everyone is doing well. Today we're going to be learning Maseches Beitzah Daf Chaf Gimel. And tomorrow morning the shachar starts at 6:30. I imagine it will end around 7:45 and then 7:42. All right, so shiur might start as early as 7:40 and 7:35 if the chazan is very aggressive. So okay, it'll be fine. So we're starting today 3 lines from the bottom of Chaf Beis. Amud Beis at Ibayalahu. And we had begun a brief conversation yesterday about incense, whether that was allowed. And now we're going to discuss a number of iterations of that here in the Gemara today. 3 lines from the bottom. What about smoking foods? We do this to meats, but they used to do it to fruits and vegetables and to other things as well. So that's a machlokes in the Amoraim. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav says that it's aser. Ushmuel Amar Muter machlokes. A key, critical Rashi here that speaks to many things as it relates to doing certain types of malacha on Yontif, and this is where a lot of the conversation about smoking cigarettes and other smokable items that actually burn, not the e-cigarettes, those for sure are going to be muksa / aser. And here Rashi says as follows, 5 lines from the bottom in Rashi, Dibur hamaskil mahu la'ashen. Rashi says, mahu la'ashen peiros be'ashan, they would smoke fruits inside an incense container, besamim, liklot ta'am habosem, just so that the apple, you want it to be cinnamon infused, good, you'd put some cinnamon inside the smoking machine, whatever it was, and it would create that smell. Then the next Rashi says, aser. The first shita says it's not allowed. The tifnu kiseruhu, you're just being a little over the top. It's unnecessary. The ein shave l'chol nefesh. This is not shaykh to everyone. And coupled with and also Bahai Ishun Ika Av Malacha. And here there's an Av Malacha. This is where many poskim indicate that smoking on Yom Tov is going to be prohibited. And the reason why is because there's an Av Malacha involved, which is Havara. You're burning things. You're burning the tobacco. You're burning the contents of the cigarette and or the cigar. And because it's an Av Malacha and it's not Shava L'chol Nefesh, one of the criterion is to make sure that it's Shava L'chol Nefesh. So that's why, according to many poskim, smoking is halachically problematic on Yom Tov. It's based on this exact sugya right here. Anyways, that's shita number 1. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar, Rav says that it's aser, Shmuel says it's mutter. Rav Huna explains the shita of Rav who says that it's aser mipnei shemechabe, that when you throw these spices onto the fire, it, at least momentarily, puts out part of the fire. So let's say, for example, you have a bonfire and you throw some, I know I've seen this before, where you throw some kinds of small powders in there. They can, for a moment, they can lower the flame, and that's a problem. Well, 2 lines from the bottom, Amalei Rav Nachman, V'nema Mar Mipnei Shemavir. Why are you only saying that it's mechabe? It also could be mavir. It also could increase the flame. Says the Gemara, you're right. Amar lei tchilaso mechabe v'sofa mavir. You're right. It's a double problem. It's not a single problem. And even so, that's where the machlokas is. Now, on this same note, Amar Rav Yehuda al gabe gachelas aser. It is not allowed. Where is this prohibition? Where does this prohibition exist about the creating the incense smoke? That's al gabe gachelas, directly on coals. Al gabe cheres mutter. Rashi says al gabe cheres shehisiku. If you heated up the cheres, and then on that very, very hot bowl, you throw in the spices, that's fine. That's mutter because you don't have mechabe and you don't have mavir. The Rava, top line of Chav Gimel, the Rava Amar al gabe cheres nami aser mishum de kamolid recha. This is a new principle. We have had it in some iterations, certainly in Maseches Shabbos, that you are doing something called molid recha. You're creating a new smell. Rashi, second line, dibur hamaskal de kamolid recha. You're creating a smell. Shenichnas becheres shelo hayabo reach. The container itself, the cheres, didn't have a smell in it before. Now you're giving it a smell. V'aser midrabanan shemoli davar chadash. You're creating something new. Karavhu laosem malacha chadasha, similar to doing its own malacha. So therefore, it's not allowed. Says the Gemara, Rabba v'Rav Yosef d'Amrei Tarvaihu. These 2 Amoraim in the 3rd century of the Amoraim, they agree to the following: Schufe kasa ashirai, to turn over a cup that has incense in it. It has the strong smell in it. To put it on ashirai, on your clothing, b'yom tava aser. You're not allowed to give that positive smell to your clothing. Shabbos, this is for sure true that when one puts on spray deodorant, you have to put it on location. You can't spray your clothes with it. Even before Shabbos, you could spray your clothes. They have these things called body sprays. They're kind of like deodorant, I guess. I don't know, they sell it. You can spray your clothes before, but you cannot do that on Yom Tov or on Shabbos. So what is the reason? My time, 4th line. What's that? Oh, sorry, that's my question. Mishum.
Smelled the fragrances.
Yeah, he started coughing right away. This is psychosomatic learning. It's the second you hear about it, it's okay. So my time. Well, what's the reason why this is usher? For the same exact reason. Mishum de kamo didrecha. Okay, how does this differentiate? If you have some of the smell on your hands and it rubs off, and if there's some type of moisture on your hand and it touches the garment, so says the Gemara, Hasam, in that case over there in that Mishnah that's being referenced of mololo, there Hasam recha isa, it already had a smell in it, and you're just adding to it. That's not a case of molid recha. That's not new smell that you're adding to it. But hacha, in our case with the cheres, where we said that the cheres has been heated and now you're adding the spice to the cheres, it's a new smell and it's not allowed. Now Rava Amar, just an iteration on the above, he says al gabi gacheles nami mutter. He says, you guys are being so machmir. You're allowed to put the spices even directly onto the fire because midit havia bisra gomer. You're allowed to cook meat on there. Why would you not be allowed to cook spices? It's mutter to cook them. So he lumped. What? Okay, but there's a psukim and chumash for that. For that, there you could have a heter from psukim and chumash. Right, everything is out. Yeah, everything is based on psukim. But here we're talking about a regular guy. He's got his own version of something that smells good, cinnamon, whatever, labrius, and he tosses it onto the flame. So Rava is like, what are you guys all talking about? Of course, this is totally fine. Now this goes in the face of the concept of shaveh l'chol nefesh that we were discussing earlier, because Rava seems to have a very expansive, hey, go ahead, throw everything on the grill. It's not necessarily simple, because as you can see from the other Amoraim that we've been learning, not everyone agrees to that. Good. Of a similar nature, 9 lines down, Chav Gimel Amar Darash Rav Givia, that's his name, Mibei Ksil, from the city of Ksil, Apischa de Bei Reish Galusa, at the door, at the opening of the home of the Reish Galusa, and here's what he said: Kitura Shari. You're allowed to generate smoke. What does that mean? Amar le'amemar, my ktura. What smoke are we talking about? Iktura biyadi. We would never have known what this meant without Rashi. And Rashi basically says that it's a type of way to smooth out your clothes. It's a steam that's used to smooth out clothes. Iktura biyadi. That's my se'umanhu. For sure, that's going to be problematic. V'ila ashen. And if it's going to be like we started our Gemara on the bottom of Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, if it's la'ashen. So then says the Gemara aser tehaka mechabed, and that should be problematic because it's mechabed. Obviously, this is not within line of Rava above. This is within the first track of Amoraim that we saw. So says the Gemara, what then did he mean when he said that Keturas Shari? It can't be that you're allowed to press your clothes with heat, with steam, and it also can't be that you're allowed to throw it on the fire. So says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Ashi la'olam la'ashen. We're talking about smoking an item. And there's nothing wrong with it at all. I hold leniently, like Rava, that you're allowed to put it on there just like you would any other meat, because it's yontif and you're allowed to cook, no problem at all. So then says the Gemara, here's a slightly different version with a very similar conclusion. Ika de Amre, we're a quarter of the way down Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. There are those who say that the conversation went like this. Amar le Abemar my ketura. What was this ketura? Ketura biyadi my seuman. Who, if it's the air, the steam that's going to smooth out wrinkles, then that's a my seuman. That's not allowed. Ila ashen, and if it's to generate smoke to give something flavor, aser de kamolid recha. So how then did we answer this question? Amar Ravashi, and here's where the change is. Ana amrisa nehale. Umishmei de Gavra Rabba. I said it in front of you, and I said it in the name of a Gavra Rabba. Amrisa Nehale, he said it as well. La'olam la'ashen. Really, we are talking about la'ashen to generate smoke, and therefore midi dehavia bisra agumri. And therefore, it is permissible because Rava was really right, Ladina. And the way that he held is that even the incense could then be put on a fire. If we were to stop here and ask the shaila that we started with, which is what about smoking on Yom Tov, it would seem from here that it's mutter. And it's very interesting that the Gemara seems to not factor in the shaveh l'chol nefesh piece. This is a very serious debate in the poskim. If anyone does have a habit of any kind and they do typically or are interested in smoking on the Chag, I highly recommend asking a shaila to a competent posek. It is really not simple. In the same category is showering. Is showering shaveh l'chol nefesh? Is that something that everybody needs? It's a 2-day yontif. So if you shower every other day, it's really no big deal. You shower before yontif, you shower motzei the second day, it's not that much longer than usual. If you're a mefunuk and you shower 3 times a day, I could understand that how that happens. And the way we live now, most people shower either every day or every other day, approximately, give or take. So it really does, that this does generate a shaila. It's a little strange that the poskim don't have a lot of kulas here, because that's way more commonplace than smoking. I hope showering is more of a healthy habit than smoking. Nevertheless, the poskim do speak about this as a concern. And we are right now a third of the way down to the two dots. We had said in the Mishnah on the previous page on Chaf Beis Amud Beis that one of the things that Rabbi Gamliel was lenient in was that he was allowed to make a gedi mekulas b'leilei psachim, that he was allowed to take a gedi, he was allowed to take an animal and cover it with its fat all over its head, just like the Korban Pesach was brought, and he was okay with that. Tanya, the Beitzah writes, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Todos ish Romi. There was Todos, seemingly he was a Jew, and he lived in Rome. And he gets b'nei Romi le'echol gedi mekulas b'leilei psachim. And he recommended to all of the Jews who lived there, everybody should eat this food. Shalchu le, the Chachamim sent a letter. Ilmale Todos out, had you not been so great, Gozarnu alecha nidui, we would have put you into cherem. Why? Shal tamachel es b'nei Yisrael kachim b'chutz. You're not allowed to do that. You live in Rome. Rome's not the Beis HaMikdash. How could you possibly feed everybody kachim? The Gemara is like real kachim? Like kachim sal kadaitach? Obviously, it's not real kachim. So you're not even in Eretz Yisrael. There's no context in which to do these things. These are shilas that we spoke about in previous Masechtas. Let's say that right now, b'doreinu ata, without a Beis HaMikdash, I dedicate an animal that I don't have. Let's say I had an animal in my pen, and I said, hey, this animal, this one's for the Beis HaMikdash. Does that work? The mechanics, does it work halachically? Those are shilas. But here the Gemara says, kachim sal kadaitach. He lives in Rome. It's not even shaykh that anyone would consider this to be kachim. Says the Gemara, no, ela ema ke'ein kachim. It just looks like it, and we don't want there to be any mistakes when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt. So let's keep things on the straight and narrow, and don't recommend this to people.
I don't understand the case.
They were just in Chutz La'aretz, and he was. It appears that's what the Gemara said. That's what the Gemara seems to say. Yeah, that's what it seems. So either way, they didn't like it. It wasn't for the Beis HaMikdash. He just told everyone. He recommended to everyone to make a gedi on that night of Pesach to be in appearance of, just to look like it. Yeah, that's what the Gemara says. B'leilei psachim. So the new Mishnah halfway down writes, Shlosha Dvarim Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah matir. There are three things that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was lenient on, and the Chachamim Osrim and the Chachamim did not agree. Number one, Paraso, his par, the par of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, he allowed his par to be Yotze B'Ritzua Shebein Karneha, with a decorative strip of fabric between the two horns. And clearly he viewed it as what we would now call a tachshit, that one is allowed to wear tachshitim. Women are allowed to go out with jewelry. There's nothing wrong with that. They wear earrings, they can wear a necklace, they can wear bracelets, no problem. That's fine. So halachically, it seemed that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah had no problem with his par wearing this little strip of fabric. What? No, nothing. The Korban Pesach wasn't a par. The Korban Pesach was a gedi. This was just a Hilchos Shabbos. One could comb the hair with a metal comb on Yom Tov, which was very difficult to understand because it often, as we will see in the Gemara, could make the animal bleed. And we were allowed to grind up the pilpulin in their rechaim. So that's what the Gemara says. Okay, so let's figure out how this works. The end of the Mishnah writes, and we'll come back to this line in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ein Mekarden es habehema b'yom tov ibnei she'oseh chabura. Rabbi Yehuda says, and this is very important, we'll see that this is really against our general understanding of Rabbi Yehuda. He says that we're not allowed to use the metal comb to comb the mane of an animal on Yom Tov, ibnei she'oseh chabura, because it could cause for a bruising on the skin. A bruising could even just be the reddening of a skin, drawing blood and giving someone a good punch. Halacha l'maisa, this applies in Hilchos Mila when a person does atafas dam bris. Atafas dam bris is where a moel will do a secondary poke for someone whose bris wasn't kosher for a whole host of reasons. Either it was done too early, or it was done in a hospital setting where the practitioner wasn't an Orthodox Jew, an observant Jew. These are uncomfortable conversations. The Rabbi first gave me this kula that if you think that they're going to use a secular moel, just push off the bris, because otherwise the bris is not kosher. So it's really quite complicated. And they say, oh, have you heard about Mr. or Rabbi so-and-so who's, I know is not from. So what am I supposed to tell? Like, it's very uncomfortable. Like, oh, well, they're not Sabbath observant. So then the covenant and the Sabbath, they're both covenants. And we got to make sure that the covenant is being done by someone who keeps. It's very awkward. Anyways, halacha l'maisa, when you do atafas tam bris, the halacha and shulchan aruch is that you don't have to actually draw blood. The blood just has to be nitzra, or just has to show. So I've done, this only has happened to me once when I've done atafas tam bris, where I did the poke, and For whatever reason, it didn't actually pierce the skin, but the skin turned extremely red. It was very irritated from the needle. And that was considered enough. The baby was fighting and kicking. I was 2 years old. He was an older kid. It wasn't so simple. Anyways, so this is the same thing. Makes the skin look to be very, very red. By the way, this is separate of the isser of gozes, of tearing out hair, right? There's a lot of possible things that can go wrong here. We're assuming under these circumstances that it's their Shabbos brush, as it were. For those of us who brush our hair regularly, I am not one of those people. So Mark, right, every day. Yeah, what? Twice a day. So there are regular brushes where the bristles are very thick, and sometimes those bristles are very hard. Fine. But on Shabbos, we need to have a brush that really doesn't pull any hair, much more difficult for people who have very long hair, of course. And for a woman to brush her hair with a brush in a way that doesn't pull out hair, the best raya is to practice during the week and look at the brush when you're done. If the brush has a lot of hairs in it, you're in big trouble. Find a way to get your hair to be mesudar on Shabbos. Do whatever you have to do, but it's still possibly a serious isser of brushing your hair. One should be very careful. Anyways, Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that you can't use this comb because it made a chabura. Aval mekartzifin, you could use a comb that was made out of wood. V'chachamim omrim ein mekardin af lo mekartzifin. You can't use the metal comb, and you also can't use the wood comb. We're going to go through all three of these shitos before we end today. We're going to be finishing toward the bottom, right at the end of the parak, at the bottom of Chav Gimel Amud Beis. Let's go. We are 2/3 of the way down. We're at the Gemara. The way that our Mishnah spoke, it seemed to assume that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, it said paraso yotza, his par. L'meimer de Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah chada para havyule. He only had one par. We know from other places in Shas. Ve'amar Rab ve'amri lo. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Some say Rav said it, and some said that his Talmud Rabbi Yehuda said it. We know that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was fantastically wealthy. Tleisar alfe egle hava meiser Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah me edre kol shata v'shata. Every year he would give 13,000 animals as meiser, which means that his base number was 130,000 animals. What do you mean paraso? His par, he only had one animal, says the Gemara. That's not what's going on. The Gemara says, Tana lo shalohai. So the Mishnah that we're referring to here, it wasn't even his animal altogether. Of course, he was a very wealthy person and had a lot of, the currency of the time was either agricultural or animal, one of the two. Ella shel shchenaso haisa, it belonged to his neighbor. Because when she allowed this animal to go out with this ribbon in its hair, nikres al shemo, the animal was referred to as though it was his, even though he had way more than that. Says the Gemara at the two dots, what does it mean, karud, and what does it mean, karsif? These two types of combing. Karud ketanim, the teeth, the bristles on the card were very small, the osin chabura, and were able to puncture the skin or at least damage the skin in some way. Kartzuf gedolim, the ein osin chabura, much wider bristles, much bigger bristles. They were probably more round at the end, and they didn't cause any damage. The gimel machlokos badavar. There is a three-way machlokes in regards to these combs. You can imagine the iterations. Neither of you can't use either of them. You can use both of them, and you can only use one of them. So we're going to see all three of those sheets as now. Says the Gemara, 10 lines or so from the bottom on Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yehuda Savar, Davar she'enu miskabein aser, that in general, Rabbi Yehuda, as we know, famous Shas Sugya, we know that when a person does an act and it was davar she'enu miskabein, it will possibly have a secondary result. I wanted to just bounce the ball off of the wall, and inadvertently it turned off the light switch. So was the throwing the ball off of the wall okay? Says Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that a davar she'enu miskabein, even though it wasn't your intention, you're not allowed. Mihu, however, karud ketanin ba'osim chabura. We are going to be strict on the metal comb, but kartzuv kedolim ve'ein osim chabura, and he doesn't make a gzeira v'lo gazrin and kartzuv atu kard. We don't make a rabbinic decree on the wooden comb in light of the metal comb, or the large tooth comb in light of the small tooth comb, because he doesn't extend the gzeira. We'll see in a moment of others who do. The Rabbanan savrei nami Rabbi Yehuda davar she'enu miskabein aser. The Rabbanan were all of the opinion, they sided with Rabbi Yehuda that davar she'enu miskabein is aser. The gazrin on kartzuv atu karu. They were very strict. So the first opinion split. The first opinion said no metal one, but yes to the wooden one. The second one says no to both. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah savra like Reb Shimon. Our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, he sides like Reb Shimon in regards to the machlokas of Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda about davar she'enu miskabein. Da'amar davar she'enu miskabein mutter ubein karud ubein kartzuv shari. No matter what, it has to be the case that both of them are mutter. The only way this works in halachic terms, The only way that a davar she'eino miskaven can exist, the case, is where the result of a malacha is not definite. There have to be times where we take this metal comb and we can comb the mane of an animal, whatever we're doing, and there isn't a chabura. Because if it was definite, then it's not a davar she'eino miskaven. Then it's a psik reshe, and that's for sure not allowed. No one would ever allow such a thing. The only machlokas of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is in a case where the result is not definite. Amar Rava, what is the halacha? Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. So Rava said in the name of Rav Nachman, who said in the name of Shmuel, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd centuries, respectively, of the Amoraim. The Amrila, some say no, Amar Rav Nachman, just the middle of those, the 3rd century. Lechudei, he said by himself that halacha is ki Reb Shimon, that we paskin like Reb Shimon. How do we know that we paskin like Reb Shimon that davar she'eino miskaven is mutter? Because he used our Mishnah. Shaharei Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah modelo. Because we see in our Mishnah right here on Chav Gimel that Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah allowed for these combs to be used. So Amar le Rava Nachman. Rava was a Talmud. He said to his Rebbe, I don't understand. V'lema mar, there's the word of respect. He doesn't say V'lema, his name. V'lema mar, my master. Maybe you, my master, should say halacha kareb Yehuda, because after all, in our Mishnah, we see in our Mishnah that the Chachamim don't agree with Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, which means that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yehuda, which means why did you say that the halacha is like Reb Shimon if our Mishnah holds like the Chachamim? That doesn't make any sense. Amar Leiser Rav Nachman responds, Ana ki Reb Shimon severely. First of all, forget about our Mishnah. I hold like Reb Shimon. And our Mishnah is just the icing on the cake. Ve'od sheharei Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah modula. Modelo. He as well holds of him. We paskin like this in halacha. We paskin like Reb Shimon, and therefore davar she'eino miskaven is in fact mutter. We just have to make sure that the potential results of the action that we're doing are not definite. So you can bounce a ball on a wall where there's a light switch. You can't be your goal. You can't benefit from the result. It's not what you want. It's just you're bouncing a ball off the wall. And you're allowed to do that. Rabbi Yehuda would say you're not allowed to do that because that might lead to a problem. Rabbi Shimon says we're not so worried. Davar she'eino miskaven is mutter. That brings us to the second to final Mishnah on the parak on Chav Gimel Amud Beis. What's that?
It's like the vending machine. There's a whole thing. Like if, like in the halach way, like your thing's stuck trying to get out.
Yeah.
You shake it to get yours out, but if everything comes out, can you benefit from all the different stuff that's coming out?
That's very interesting. But the concept is very similar. I hear the comparison. That the halachos have to be different though because it's a mekach umemkar shaila of taking other people's products. Yeah, I mean, like the results would be different. We would not be able to eat the other food. With Reb Shimon's shita, the uniqueness is if it's mutter to bounce the ball off the wall, then even if you turn off the light or turn on the light, you didn't do anything wrong. That's the real chap of Reb Shimon. Is that davar she'eino miskaven, even if the result turns out to be malacha, that's okay. Because that wasn't what you were intending. It wasn't to your benefit. And in your case, you may be able to shake the thing a little. It depends what we're talking about, right? So over the years in the JCC, when I was a kid and I borrowed long-term borrowed from Dad's wallet, and I would put some money in the machine and shake it a little bit, you'd hope that the Reese's peanut butter cup would come out. And if the other stuff came out, kol hakodem zacha, but it's probably Geneva D'Oraisa. Yeah. Maybe Geneva D'Rabbanan if the owners were good. I don't know. It's not good.
Were the other ones talking about Chatas then?
What if you didn't take the snacks?
Well,
It's like Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda?
Rabbi Yehuda would say it's in a Serdor, seemingly. It could be that he only holds that way midrabanan. We'd have to get into this together. I don't remember how he holds, but I don't know. I think it's a machlokes in regards to Dine D'Oraisa. I'm not sure. Good question. All right, very top of Chav Gimel. Let's get to the end of the parak. Harechaim shel pilpulin, the grinders that were used to crush black peppers or any peppers, because the peppers are little spheres. That's how they grow in nature. And in order to benefit from them, we turn them into very small flakes. So that thing is tmeya, is subject to becoming tuma. It's subject to becoming tameh because it's actually a kli. Mishum shlosha kelim, it's built out of 3 things. And if you look at your average pepper grinder, you'll see the same thing. Mishum kli kibul, the receptacle at the bottom catches the flakes. Umishum kli mateches, umishum kli kivara. The thing at the top is the grinder, that's the mateches. Umishum kli kivara, it has a filter in the middle to make sure that the spheres, the actual peppercorns don't fall through. Only flakes can fall through of a desired size. So that's what the Gemara says, because it has the status of a kli. So the halacha is that it is subject to the rules of tuma. 3 lines down, Tana, this is just a brisa repeating effectively what our Mishnah writes, Tachtona mishum kli kibul and tzais mishum kli kvara, Elyona mishum kli mateches. These are the 3 parts. At the bottom is the receiving end, the middle is the filter, and the top is the metal part that does the grinding. Last Mishnah in the parak, Baruch Hashem. We are moving along. We're more than halfway done with Maseches Beitzah. So it says the Mishnah, Agala shel katan. You have a little stroller that is used for a child. The halacha is tmei medras. It is because it's a kli. It's subject to the rules of tuma. Tumas medras is when a nida or a zava or a yoledis would put their weight on top of that. They'd sit down or put most of their body's weight on it. Then it gets the status of tuma from that person. Vinitelis b'Shabbos, it can be used because it's not muksa. This doesn't answer the question of pushing strollers on Shabbos when there's no eruv. You're not allowed to push a stroller on Shabbos where there is no eruv. Major elements of our community here will not use the eruv, and we have friends who we like having meals with, but they don't use it. We waited till their kids got old enough till the child could actually walk because they would not use strollers, or we'd invite them on Yontif, whatever it was, or we just wouldn't invite them at all, which was also an option. So that's what he says when he tells b'Shabbos it's not muksa. Ve'ena nigreres ella al gabe kelim. But, and this Mishnah is very strange because we know other Mishnayos just intuitively from over the years, ve'ena nigreres ella al gabe kelim. It cannot be dragged over dirt unless it was on top of something, like a garment, like a sheet of some kind. Now, we already are, in our brains, we're aware of this other Mishnah. Hold on 1 second. We know you can drag over dirt, even if it makes a charitz, davar she'ein miskavein, or malacha she'ein tzricha legufa, whatever all the halachos were. And then this is the strangest part of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kol hakelim. Rabbi Yehuda says, all kelim, ein nigrarin, they cannot be dragged. Chutz min ha'agala mipnei shi koveshes. He says that all kalim are not nigrarin, but when there's something with wheels on it, that's not a problem. It doesn't dig out the dirt, it compresses the dirt. Lidugma, let's say someone is riding one of those little two-wheel scooters, those razor scooters. So even if it makes a ditch in the ground, it's not actually a furrow where you've removed dirt. You're just literally compressing dirt downward. Not good for the grass, but it's not actually changing anything, really. It's not really moving anything so much, just compressing. Let's learn this last sugya in the parak, and then we'll call it a night. The reason, the way it could become tameh is when a person would put their weight on it. Obviously, an adult is not going to sit in that, but if they were to lean on it with their weight, and they were a nida, a yoledes, a zava, or a zav, whatever it is, or if the child was a zav, that can happen too, or a zav or a zava, that's a possibility as well. Tuma knows no bounds, so then under those circumstances, that could become tameh. It's mutter to use because it has the status of a kli. It can only be dragged over something else. You can't bring a stroller over grass. It has to be over a blanket on the grass. Al gabe kelim in only when there's something else on the ground. Al gabe karkalo, but directly on the ground is not allowed. Asks the Gemara, my taima, what's the reason why you have to have something separating the wheels of the stroller from the ground? To ka'avid charetz, because you might make a ditch. Asks the Gemara, money. Whose shita is that? Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda. This is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar davar she'ein miskavein aser, like we were learning earlier. These two Mishnayos are connected from behind the scenes. That this Mishnah here is indicating a little bit like the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, as we know, holds davar she'ein miskavein aser. I'm not going over the grass with my stroller in order to make a charitz. I'm going because the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and your grass happens to be in the middle. It's not nice to walk on people's grass. I try to avoid it, but that's what the din is. To eat Reb Shimon, if in fact you would have said that this case was Reb Shimon, for sure Reb Shimon would not have needed anything to separate the wheels of the stroller from the ground. Ha'amar davar she'ein miskavein mutter. It's none, as the Mishnah writes. Reb Shimon Omer gorer adam mita kisa v'safsal, that a person is allowed to drag a bed or a chair or a bench. So we see that it must be that way. Says the Gemara, that's not so simple that this is Rabbi Yehuda and not Reb Shimon. Why? Because Ema Seifa, take a look at the end of the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ein hakol nigrorin b'Shabbos, chutz min ha'agala b'ibnei shi koveshes. B'ibnei she koveshes in aval charetz lo avda. Oh, so we see over here that the concern of this Rabbi Yehuda in this Mishnah, different than the Rabbi Yehuda in general. Rabbi Yehuda in this Mishnah seems to be concerned about koveshes, about crushing, depressing dirt, instead of actually making a charitz. And then this is a bit of a bombshell for having learned this machlokas so many times in Shas already. And the Gemara concludes the parak Trei Tanai ve'alibad Rabbi Yehuda. There's a fundamental machlokas. What did Rabbi Yehuda oser when he said you can't drag something over the ground? Was he asering even simply the crushing of dirt, which is this Mishnah here, which he says that it's koveshes, namely something with wheels, or no, it's only when there is a charitz? charetz. And that is a machlokas within two talmidim of Rabbi Yehuda who did not have a clear understanding. Hadron Allah Yom Tov Yiratzon. We should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Wishing you all a beautiful night. See you in the morning if you're joining at about 7:40 or so.
7:40?
Ish.